You saw the wrong thing, he told her, but 4 years later, he found her with his 3 sons. He remembered the sound of the rain first. It tapped softly against the cafe windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of passing cars and glowing traffic lights. People were talking quietly, spoons clicking against porcelain cups, the air warm and heavy with the scent of roasted coffee beans. Everything felt ordinary, except for the way Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she set her cup down. Andrew sat across from her, posture straight, shoulders squared like he was preparing for a negotiation instead of a conversation with the woman he claimed to love. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his blue eyes steady, calm, unreadable. He always looked composed in moments where she felt like she was unraveling. It used to make her feel safe. Now it made her feel like she didn't know him at all. There was another woman sitting beside him. A beautiful woman, of course. Tall, polished, effortless in a way that suggested she had been taught to look perfect long before she understood why perfection mattered. Her laugh was light, controlled, without depth, as though she didn't feel things too strongly and didn't need to. Sophia had walked in expecting a conversation, a chance to fix what had begun cracking between them. She didn't know what exactly had changed, but something had. She could feel it, like a shift in the air before a storm. She had hoped they would talk. She had hoped he would say he was tired, confused, overwhelmed, anything. Anything at all. But what she saw instead was him sitting close to another woman in a way that didn't look like coincidence or accident or misunderstanding. Her chest tightened painfully. Her breath caught. She whispered, not trusting her voice to be louder, "Andrew." He looked at her then. Really looked. But instead of guilt, or regret, or even surprise, there was only annoyance. Like she was interrupting something important. Like she was the intruder here. "You saw the wrong thing," he said, his tone flat, as if that was all the explanation required. As if the weight in her lungs, the sudden ache in her ribs, the certainty that something inside her was tearing, meant nothing in comparison to his certainty. Sophia blinked. Rain streaked down the glass beside him, making the city look distant, unreachable, cold. "Did I?" she asked, her voice steady in a way that betrayed none of the panic clawing inside her. "Yes," he replied, already turning slightly back toward the woman beside him. As if the discussion was over. As if her presence was irrelevant. Something inside Sophia went quiet. Not shattered. Not broken. Quiet. She looked at him, at the man she had laughed with late at night, the man who had once held her face like it was precious, the man who told her he loved her. And she realized that she had loved him in a way that had left her unprotected. Too open. Too exposed. And now there was no shield left. "I understand," she whispered. She stood. Her legs felt strangely light, like they might not hold her. But they did. She turned and walked toward the door, the bell above it chiming softly when she pushed it open. The rain greeted her with a cold kiss across her skin, but she did not shiver. She did not look back. He did not follow. He did not call her name. He let her go. Outside, the city continued moving, unaware of her heartbreak, her silence, her hollow chest. She crossed the street slowly, breathing carefully, like one inhale too deep would cause her entire body to collapse. She told herself she would not cry. Not here. Not now. 1 month later, she found out she was pregnant. Her hands shook around the test. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the 2 lines that changed everything. Her heart pounded, and the air felt thick, and the world suddenly tilted into something terrifying and bright. Then the ultrasound showed 3 heartbeats. 3 lives. 3 pieces of her and him. She pressed her hand to her stomach, and for the first time since she walked out of the cafe, she allowed herself to cry, not because she was broken, but because something new was beginning inside her, something bigger than pain. She didn't call Andrew. There was nothing left to say. She whispered into the quiet room, "I'll protect you. All of you. I promise." And she did not look back. The doctor's office smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm paper gowns, the kind of sterile stillness that usually made people uneasy. But Sophia sat very still, one hand resting over the small rise of her stomach, as though she were trying to memorize every second. The screen in front of her glowed softly, and the rhythmic sound of 3 separate heartbeats filled the room like an impossible melody. The nurse smiled gently, unaware of the turmoil beneath Sophia's composed expression. Most mothers cried from joy. Sophia felt joy, yes, but it came tangled with fear so deep it sat like a stone behind her ribs. "Triplets," the doctor had said. His voice had been warm, careful, as though he were offering her something fragile. "You'll need rest. Support. You shouldn't do this alone." Sophia nodded, though inside she wanted to laugh. She was already alone. She had been since the moment she walked out of that cafe. And now the world inside her was multiplying, 3 small hearts, 3 small futures. It was astonishing how life could expand even as your world felt like it was collapsing. She moved out of the city within 2 weeks. She packed her belongings in quiet motions, folding clothes she had once worn to brunches, to business dinners with Andrew, to evenings where his fingertips traced her jaw like she was something sacred. Those clothes went into the bottom of a suitcase. Somewhere deep. Somewhere unreachable. Instead, she carried with her what little money she had, a few photos, and the sound of 3 heartbeats echoing inside her mind. The new town was small, tucked between quiet roads and wide fields, a place where children rode bicycles on sidewalks and neighbors waved even when they didn't know your name. Her apartment was tiny, just 1 bedroom and a narrow kitchen, but sunlight spilled through the windows in gentle morning patterns, and she found herself breathing easier for the first time in weeks. She began to work remotely for a small bookkeeping firm. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was modest, but it was steady. She took online parenting classes, joined local support groups for new mothers, read books so worn from turning pages that they frayed at the edges. Some nights, when sleep refused to come, she would sit on the living room floor, one hand resting on her stomach, whispering to the lives growing inside her. "You are not mistakes," she would say softly into the silent apartment, where the refrigerator hummed and snow fell outside. "You are the best thing I have ever done." She meant it. Even when she was scared. Especially when she was scared. The months that followed were heavy. Her back ached constantly. Sleep was rare and shallow. She learned how to breathe through discomfort, how to take slow steps, how to sit when her legs shook. The nurses at her appointments often complimented her strength. They didn't know that she cried in the shower sometimes, the hot water masking the sound. They didn't know that sometimes she missed Andrew with a fierceness that frightened her, not because she wanted him back, but because some part of her remembered how it felt to be held, to belong to someone. But loneliness did not break her. Every time the babies kicked, every time she felt the flutter of movement beneath her hand, she remembered why she stayed, why she fought, why she kept going. As her due date approached, complications arose. The delivery came early. Too early. The hospital room was full of rushed footsteps and taut voices. Sophia hardly remembered the pain, she only remembered the fear that something might go wrong. Then, 3 cries. 3 small voices protesting the world. 3 fragile bodies placed one by one into her arms. They were tiny, impossibly tiny, each wrapped in identical white blankets except for the colored wristbands with their names, Leo in blue, Eli in yellow, Cameron in green. Their hair was pale, soft like down. Their eyes blinked open, clear, bright, unmistakably blue. His eyes. Sophia held them, and everything inside her softened into something unbreakable. She was theirs. And they were hers. She whispered to each of them, their names like prayers. Leo, the quiet one, looked at her as though he had seen her before. Eli wriggled and kicked, fiery, determined to take up space. Cameron curled against her heart and refused to let go. She did not think of Andrew then. Not his voice. Not his absence. Not the sentence that had once cut her open. She thought only of survival. Of love. Of the impossible, extraordinary task of raising 3 little lives. And when night fell over the quiet hospital room, and nurses moved softly in the dim light, Sophia didn't sleep. She sat awake, her body aching, her eyes heavy, but her heart full in a way that made her chest warm. She looked at her sons and whispered, "It's us now. And we're going to be okay." The first year passed in a blur of sleepless nights, spilled bottles, lullabies, and soft, exhausted laughter that came from somewhere deeper than joy. It came from survival. Sophia learned quickly that there was no such thing as rest when 3 infants needed her. If one slept, another woke. If one cried, the other 2 joined. She moved through the days like a tide, constant, steady, unstoppable even when she felt she might collapse. She held all 3 sometimes, balancing them against her chest and shoulders, humming quietly even when her throat was raw. The apartment often smelled of warm milk, laundry detergent, and something gentle and lived in, something that felt like home in a way that no penthouse ever had. The town, small and unhurried, slowly became her safety net. Mrs. Whitaker from next door would knock sometimes and leave homemade soup or fresh rolls without asking questions. The barista at the corner cafe learned to make Sophia's coffee the way she liked it, knowing she would inevitably walk by with a stroller built for 3. People smiled when they saw her. Not pity, not curiosity, just warmth. The kind she had never known in the glittering glass offices where Andrew lived his life. By the time the boys turned 1, they had already developed their own personalities. Leo was the watcher, his blue eyes always wide and thoughtful, as though he were studying the world before deciding how to join it. Eli was loud in every way, loud laugh, loud footsteps, loud joy. He was the one who reached first, climbed first, broke things first. Cameron loved touch more than anything. He pressed his cheek into Sophia's shoulder whenever she held him, as though her heartbeat was the only anchor he needed. Sophia had learned to recognize their cries in a way that felt like language, Leo's soft broken whimper, Eli's dramatic wail, Cameron's pleading hum. She had become fluent in them. Some days she felt like the strongest person she had ever known. Other days she cried quietly in the bathroom, forehead pressed to the cold tile, letting the exhaustion leak out so she could keep going. But love was constant. A love with no conditions, no requirements, no fear of being not enough. The boys loved her simply because she existed. There was nothing to prove. She told herself she didn't think about Andrew anymore. And during the day, with 3 tiny hands tugging at her shirt and 3 little heads pressing against her knees, it felt true. But at night, when the apartment was finally silent and the moonlight stretched across the floor in a thin silver stripe, her mind drifted back to him. Not to the cafe. Not to the anger. But to the way he used to look at her when he was unguarded, when the world wasn't watching. A look she had once believed meant forever. Sometimes she wondered what he would think if he saw them now. If he would smile. If he would freeze. If he would break. She wondered whether he would reach out or whether his pride would still stand taller than everything human inside him. But she never let herself imagine too long. Dreams were dangerous. Dreams could open wounds. Years passed. They grew into toddlers who toddled faster than she could keep up. She chased them through the park, wiped dirt from their cheeks, kissed scraped knees, dried tears. She read them books until her voice grew hoarse, showed them how to plant tiny seeds in cups by the windowsill, taught them how to blow bubbles in the summer wind. Their laughter became her world's music, their small, warm hands were her reason to stay strong. But loneliness lingered like a quiet presence in the corner of her life. Not the painful kind. Not anymore. More like the memory of something unfinished. She loved her sons with a love so vast it didn't leave room for emptiness, but still, there were nights when she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and stared at the chair across from her, the one no one ever sat in. The one that reminded her that once, she had loved someone who hadn't known how to love her back. There were moments too, fleeting and unspoken, when she wondered whether he ever thought of her. Whether he ever regretted. Whether he ever searched. She imagined him in some distant city, in a high-rise office wrapped in glass and cold light, still believing she was gone because she wanted to be. Still believing he hadn't lost anything worth keeping. She didn't know that by this time, Andrew had already begun searching for her, quietly at first, then obsessively. She didn't know that every night, he too sat at a table with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at a door that never opened. She didn't know that he had begun to regret, deeply, painfully, relentlessly. She didn't know that the same moonlight that fell across her sleeping sons also fell across him, alone in a penthouse full of silence. And neither of them knew that fate was already turning, slowly and inevitably, toward the moment their worlds would collide again. Andrew's office overlooked the city from the 32nd floor, a glass tower that made everything below look small and manageable. But the view did nothing to settle him anymore. The success he once carried like a second skin had begun to feel heavy, like a suit tailored too tightly across his chest. Work no longer distracted him. Deals closed, stocks rose, people congratulated him, yet each victory felt strangely hollow, like applause in an empty theater. He found himself pausing between tasks, staring out into the skyline without seeing any of it. His assistant noticed the change first. Then his colleagues. Then the board. They asked if he was tired, stressed, burned out. He always answered with the same voice, calm, direct, professional. But the truth was something he could not explain. Somewhere in the fabric of his days, a thread had been pulled loose, and nothing was quite holding together anymore. It began with a memory. A laugh in his mind, soft and familiar. Sophia's laugh. Then it became her voice, the way she'd say his name, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was trying not to smile too big. He tried to bury it. But the harder he tried, the more sharply she appeared in the quiet spaces of his mind. He replayed the moment in the cafe, though he had long convinced himself he had done nothing wrong. The woman with him that day, Vanessa, had been a business partner, nothing more. He had been frustrated, tired, irritated after a week of meetings and family pressure. Sophia arrived unexpectedly, saw them, and her expression had closed like a door. He remembered trying to explain, but the explanation had not been enough. Or maybe he hadn't really tried. Maybe pride had spoken for him long before his heart realized what it was losing. At first, he assumed she would call. She always had before. He had believed too easily in his own importance. When she didn't call after a week, he felt anger. Then confusion. Then worry. After 3 months, worry turned to fear. He called her phone. Disconnected. He called her family. They said she was fine but refused to say where she had gone. He sent messages, long ones at first, then short ones, then nothing. He drove to her old apartment. Empty. He tried to track forwarding addresses, but her name did not appear anywhere. It was as though she had been erased from the city entirely. He hired investigators, at first in secret, then openly. They found traces of her purchases, a grocery receipt here, a pharmacy visit there, but no address, no city, no destination clear enough to follow. She had vanished deliberately. The years that followed were lined with frustration and a guilt that kept sharpening instead of fading. He dated other women, attempting to move forward, but every relationship felt thin, temporary, like trying to speak through glass. His family encouraged him to remarry, to find someone appropriate, someone ready for his lifestyle. He nodded, agreed, smiled, but inside something refused. Every woman was compared to Sophia. Every conversation fell short. Sometimes, late at night, he found himself wondering whether she had been pregnant when she left. The thought came uninvited, unwelcome, and yet once it arrived, it never left. He would look at his hands and wonder what he would do if he had sent away not just her, but a family. The possibility haunted him like a shadow. He began to walk in the city on evenings when he could not bear sitting in his penthouse alone. He would pass playgrounds where children screamed joyfully and mothers called their names. He would stop in front of toy stores and look at the small clothes displayed in windows. The sight of a tricycle once made him sit on a bench and stay there for nearly an hour, motionless. Something inside him had cracked that day, something he could not mend by logic or reasoning. Then one winter morning, he heard her name again for the first time in 3 years. He was in a cafe downtown, one he had stopped at only because he felt too restless to return to work. 2 women were talking quietly behind him. One mentioned Sophia Miller and 3 boys. The words hit him like a physical blow. He didn't turn around immediately. He couldn't. His chest felt too tight. He waited until their voices began to fade, and then he stood, followed them out, and asked gently, trying to keep his voice steady, where Sophia lived now. It took months more to find her. Every lead was fragile, vague, half certain. But he followed all of them. Every one. He stopped caring about how it looked, how desperate it appeared. His reputation no longer mattered. His pride had burned away long ago. And one snowy afternoon, after 4 years of searching, his car rolled to a stop in front of a small daycare near a quiet park. He didn't know why he stopped. He didn't know what he expected. He simply felt something, something instinctive, something undeniable, telling him to look. That was when he saw them. 3 boys, nearly identical, laughing loudly as they threw snow in the air. Their hair was pale gold. Their eyes were bright, impossibly blue. His eyes. His face. His expression in miniature form. His body froze, breath suspended somewhere between disbelief and recognition so profound it felt like a cut through his ribs. And then he saw her. Sophia, standing nearby, bundled in a warm coat, her hair loose around her shoulders, a paper cup of coffee steaming in her hand. She looked older. Not worn, no, she was too strong for that. But matured. Grounded. Real in a way that made every polished, perfect woman he had ever been with since look artificial. She lifted her head. Their eyes met. Time did not stop, it simply narrowed, everything else dissolving into silence. He understood everything in that instant. The loss. The consequence. The weight of his words and his pride. The years she had lived without him. The children she had raised alone. And for the first time in his adult life, Andrew felt fear. Not pride. Not anger. Fear of what she would say. Fear of what he had done. Fear of whether forgiveness was a possibility that still existed in any universe she inhabited. He had found her. But he didn't yet know if he was too late. He didn't approach her right away. He stood there in the cold, breath clouding in the air, unable to convince his legs to move. It was the first time in his entire life that he, a man who made decisions for entire companies and commanded rooms with a single look, felt unsure of even taking one step forward. He watched Sophia kneel to fix one of the boy's scarves, the gentle way her fingers moved, her patience, the quiet steadiness she carried. She had always been like that, calm where others rushed, soft where others sharpened. But now that softness was stronger, fuller. She wasn't the same woman he remembered. She was more. One of the boys, the one in the green hat, noticed him first. The child paused mid-step, snow clinging to his mittens, head tilted as though something in Andrew's face felt familiar even if he didn't know why. Then the others followed, turning their bright blue eyes toward him with open curiosity. Andrew felt the world tilt again. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but there were no words that could capture the weight of what was happening. Sophia stood. Her breath left her visibly in the cold air. She didn't move toward him, but she didn't step back either. Her expression held no shock, no panic, just a quiet, deep exhaustion of someone who had already lived through the hardest part of the story. Andrew, she said simply, as if his name were just a name and not a wound that had healed and broken and healed again. He swallowed, the cold stinging his throat. Sophia. The silence between them was not empty. It was full, of the past, of the years lost, of all the questions neither of them dared ask yet. The boys watched with mild curiosity, not fear, not confusion, just the innocent openness of children who saw the world in possibilities, not in consequences. Sophia looked at her sons, then back at Andrew. "Come," she said quietly. "They're cold. We should talk somewhere warm." He followed her because there was nothing else he could do. The daycare workers greeted her kindly as they left, one of them smiling and reminding Sophia about a painting project tomorrow. She smiled back, small but real, and Andrew felt another stone settle in his stomach. This was her life now, simple, grounded, built with effort and love. A life without him. They walked to a small cafe on the corner, the same kind of quiet, warm place she had always gravitated toward. The boys scrambled into the booth, chattering excitedly about snow forts and cookies and whose hat had gotten the wettest. Sophia ordered hot chocolate for them, and without thinking, Andrew ordered it for himself too, just like he used to, before everything changed. The familiarity of the moment unsettled him. For a long time, they didn't speak. They simply existed in the same space again. Finally, Sophia turned to him. Her voice was calm, but not cold. "How did you find us?" The truth was too heavy to dress in anything less than honesty. "I've been looking for you for 4 years." She didn't react at first. She just blinked slowly, absorbing the words as if testing them for sincerity. 4 years is a long time to search. "It was longer without you," he answered, and it came out quiet, almost fragile, the kind of truth that wasn't meant to win anything but to be understood. Sophia looked down at her hands. They were strong hands, hands that had held 3 newborns, cooked countless meals, carried groceries while pushing a stroller, wiped tears and noses, and worked late into the night. Hands that had built a life in the shadow of heartbreak. "You hurt me," she said, not accusing, not emotional, simply naming a fact. "Not just that day. I was alone. With all of it. And it was hard. Harder than I ever thought I could endure." He closed his eyes, and for the first time, she saw his composure crack. "I know. And I will regret it for the rest of my life." The boys giggled at something, unaware of the conversation braided through silence and memory. They didn't know they were the center of the universe in that moment. They didn't know their existence was the hinge between past and future. Sophia sighed softly. "They are good boys. They're kind. They laugh easily. They're loud, and the apartment is always too small, and I'm tired most days. But I love them more than anything I have ever loved." He looked at the children again, 3 small miracles who carried his eyes. "May I know them?" His voice was barely a breath. Sophia studied him carefully. She was no longer the girl who had left her heart unguarded. She was a mother now. She was steel covered in warmth. "Yes," she said at last. "But slowly. On my terms. And only if you stay steady. They don't need people who disappear." He nodded. "I won't disappear." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the boys, brushing snow from their coats. She didn't say she forgave him. She didn't promise a future. She didn't fall back into what once was. But she didn't close the door. And for now, that was enough. He began by showing up. Not with gifts, not with grand gestures, not with apologies repeated until they meant nothing. Just presence. The first time he came to the daycare to pick the boys up with Sophia, he waited by the gate while the boys rushed into her arms first, as they always did. Then, slowly, they began to run to him too. Not all at once. Not evenly. Eli was the first, wild and fearless, sprinting straight into Andrew's legs like he had known him forever. Cameron followed after a week, reaching up with his arms in that quiet way of his that asked without needing words. Leo held back the longest. He stayed near Sophia, watching Andrew with serious eyes that seemed to be measuring something deeper than gesture or tone. Andrew didn't rush him. He knelt to his level every time and spoke softly, never reaching out first. When Leo finally stepped closer, placing one small hand on Andrew's shoulder, it felt like the unlocking of something sacred. The town began to notice him. A tall blond man with sharp suits among quiet streets and simple homes. Some people whispered, some recognized him from magazines or business articles, others simply nodded politely. But no one interfered. Small towns had a way of allowing stories to unfold at their own pace. Every weekend, they went to the park. Andrew would sit in the grass, tie small shoelaces, teach the boys how to roll snowballs or skip stones or stack sticks into imaginary forts. He learned that Eli hated mittens, Cameron refused to drink hot chocolate unless it was warm enough to wrap both hands around the cup, and Leo asked questions so thoughtful they sometimes left Andrew speechless. He learned, slowly and carefully, how to be something he had never imagined himself becoming: patient. Sophia watched all of this. Not from a distance, not like an outsider, but with a careful heart. She didn't rush forward or cling to history, but she didn't push him away either. She let the boys guide the pace, and she trusted them to recognize sincerity better than adults often could. One evening, the boys fell asleep early after a long day in the snow. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and the soft rustling of blankets. Andrew was sitting at the kitchen table, coat still draped over the back of the chair, hands wrapped around a mug of tea he hadn't touched. Sophia was rinsing dishes in the sink, her movements slow, unhurried, almost meditative. "You're good with them," she said after a moment, her back still turned. He didn't respond right away. He didn't want to ruin the simplicity of the moment with anything heavy or rehearsed. "They make it easy," he said finally. "They're extraordinary." Sophia turned then, leaning against the counter, drying her hands on a towel. "They're children," she corrected softly. "They are wonderful, yes. But they are also loud, exhausting, stubborn, messy. It's not always easy." He nodded. "I wasn't there when it was hardest. I know that." The apartment felt smaller suddenly, filled with all the things they hadn't yet said. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to ask for anything from you," she said, sitting across from him. "Not money. Not help. Not explanation. I wanted to prove I could do it myself. I had to survive. And surviving meant cutting off everything that made me weak. He looked up. Was loving me the weakness? She didn't flinch. No. Losing myself for you was. The honesty of it hit him harder than any accusation ever could have. He inhaled slowly, searching for something to say that wouldn't break the moment. I can't undo what I did, he said quietly. But I can do better now. If you'll let me. Sophia studied him, not his face, not his clothes, but his silence. His stillness. The way he didn't try to defend himself. The way he didn't try to reach for her hand. The way he wasn't asking for forgiveness, only for the chance to try again, in whatever form she allowed. You're doing better, she said. Right now. That's enough. They didn't speak of love. They didn't revisit the cafe. They didn't retell the pain. They simply sat, breathing the same warm air, while the quiet wrapped around them gently instead of painfully. Over the next weeks, something shifted, not fast, not dramatic, but steady. The boys began asking when he was coming back. He started spending evenings helping with baths, drying small damp curls with a soft towel, telling bedtime stories with voices for each character. He learned how to soothe nightmares, how to hold a child half asleep without waking him, how to fall asleep on the sofa with one or two small bodies curled against him. Sophia found herself watching him, not because she needed to evaluate him anymore, but because something about him now brought her peace instead of ache. The walls she had built around herself weren't crumbling, they were opening. One night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet again, Andrew rose to leave. He walked to the door, coat in hand. Sophia followed him to say goodnight. He paused before opening the door. Thank you, he said, just that. Sincere. Weighty. Real. Sophia nodded. Drive safe. He stepped outside, snow falling softly around him. But before he reached the stairs, she called quietly, almost too softly to hear. Andrew. He turned. You can stay for dinner tomorrow, she said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something new. A beginning, not of what once was, but of what could be. The invitation to dinner became routine faster than either of them expected. At first, it was just once a week. Then twice. Then it became normal that Andrew would knock gently at the door every evening around 6, snow dusting his coat or wind reddening his cheeks, and 3 boys would thunder down the hallway shouting his name. Sophia cooked simple meals, stews, pasta, roasted vegetables, and Andrew learned how to set the table properly with mismatched plates and forks that didn't match because nothing in this home was curated or decorative. Everything here was real, lived in, and warm in a way his penthouse had never been. One night in February, after dinner, the boys insisted that everyone build a blanket fort in the living room. They tugged cushions from the couch, dragged chairs across the floor, and demanded Sophia find the biggest blankets in the house. Andrew helped them drape the fabric from chair backs and sofa arms, his hands awkward at first, but the boys corrected him with so much authority and confidence that he found himself laughing, genuinely, freely, like he hadn't in years. Sophia sat on the floor watching him, her legs crossed and her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The soft lamplight cast warmth across her face, and her expression was thoughtful, almost tender. The boys eventually crawled into the blanket fort, giggling loudly, whispering secrets only 3 brothers can understand. Sophia and Andrew sat in the dim living room in the leftover quiet, their laughter fading into comfortable silence. Do you miss it? She asked suddenly, her voice low. Your old life. The one before all of this. He looked at her, slowly, and shook his head. I miss who I thought I was. But I don't miss who I actually was. She absorbed that. It wasn't the kind of sentence someone said to impress. It was something that came from a place with scars. He leaned back, resting one arm along the sofa. I used to think everything had to be earned. Money. Reputation. Success. Even affection. I thought love was a transaction. His jaw tightened, not from anger but from regret. I didn't know how to be gentle. I didn't know how to stay when things weren't perfect. Sophia didn't look away. And now? He exhaled through his nose, slow, weighted. Now I stay. Even when I don't know what to say. Even when I'm afraid. Even when I don't deserve to. The honesty in his voice made something inside her soften, not dramatically, not like a door swinging open, but like ice beginning to melt. The boys eventually fell asleep inside the fort, their breathing soft and even. Andrew carried them to bed, one by one, learning how to shift his weight so as not to wake them, memorizing the feeling of small arms looping instinctively around his neck. Sophia followed him, tucking blankets around each child, brushing hair from sleepy foreheads. Their movements fell into sync, as if they had done this together forever. Later, in the kitchen, Sophia poured him tea. He wrapped his hands around the warm cup, not drinking, just feeling the heat. The apartment was quiet, calm, filled with the faint scent of cinnamon and something like peace. Sophia leaned against the counter, her gaze steady. "What are you afraid of?" she asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "That you'll forgive me only enough to let me stay in their lives, but never enough to let me return to yours." The words struck her, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true in a way that revealed how deeply he had been thinking, how long he had been waiting. She set her mug down, the sound soft but final in the quiet kitchen. "I'm afraid of something too." He lifted his eyes. "I'm afraid that if I let you back in, it will hurt if you leave again. And I can't break the way I did before. The boys can't either." This was the truth that had lived in the space between them all along. He stepped closer, not invading, not reaching, just closing enough distance so his voice could stay soft. "I won't leave," he said. "Not because I want a second chance with you. Not because I regret what happened. Not because I feel guilty. I won't leave because I love them. Because they are mine. And because I want to be the kind of man who deserves to be theirs." Her breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition of something real. This was not the man she walked away from. This was someone rebuilt. Someone who had bled and learned. She looked at him for a long time, the quiet stretching out, warm and heavy. "You're changing," she whispered. "No," he corrected gently. "I've changed." The difference mattered. Sophia didn't step into his arms. He didn't reach for her. Love did not need to rush, not now. But she did something small, something fragile and enormous at the same time. She touched his hand. Just once. Just enough. And he closed his eyes, not to savor it, but to respect it. It was not a declaration. It was permission. A beginning. Spring came softly to the town, the snow melting into bright puddles along the sidewalks, the trees budding with the first quiet signs of green. The boys were 4 now, full of energy, curiosity, and the wild joy that came from discovering the world one small piece at a time. They chased each other in the yard behind the apartment, their laughter echoing against the wooden fence, their golden hair shining in the late afternoon sun. Sophia watched them from the porch, a light cardigan draped over her shoulders, her eyes following every movement with a tenderness that had been carved into her over years of motherhood and endurance. Andrew sat beside her, elbows resting on his knees, watching the boys with the kind of attention that held no distance anymore. He had moved to the town 3 months ago, not into her home, but into an apartment nearby, one close enough that the boys could run between their houses in less than a minute. He didn't ask to move in with them, didn't rush anything, didn't try to fit himself into spaces that weren't ready for him yet. He simply made himself present. Consistent. Reliable. It was slow, steady, ordinary, and it was that ordinariness that made it sacred. Sophia had begun to let herself relax in his presence. There were evenings when they cooked together, when his hand brushed hers and neither of them pulled away too quickly. There were mornings when he brought coffee to her doorstep while the boys still slept, and they shared quiet conversation on the porch while the sun rose over rooftops. There were moments when she caught him watching her, not with longing, not with regret, but with something softer and deeper. Something like gratitude. One Saturday afternoon, the boys insisted on going to the lake. The water was still cold, but the air had warmed enough that the wind felt less sharp on their cheeks. They brought sandwiches, fruit, and the boys' favorite chocolate cookies. The lake shimmered under a pale blue sky, and the boys ran to its edge, throwing small stones into the water to see the ripples expand in rings. Sophia spread a blanket on the grass and sat down. Andrew settled beside her, closer than he used to, but still leaving space she could close or widen whenever she needed. They watched the children in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. After a while, Sophia spoke, her voice low and thoughtful. "When I left, I thought I had lost everything. Not just you, my home, my stability, my future. I didn't know who I was without us." Andrew didn't interrupt. He waited. "But then the boys came," she continued. "And I realized I had never really understood strength until I had to hold 3 lives in my arms by myself. I learned how to survive. But I also learned how to live. And I don't regret that." He nodded slowly, his jaw shifting, a quiet ache in his eyes. "I don't regret any part of you," he said. "And I regret every part of how I treated you." Sophia turned her face toward him. The wind brushed her hair across her cheek, and he lifted a hand, slowly, carefully, to tuck the strand behind her ear. She let him. "I didn't know how to love you then," he said. "Not the way you deserved. I loved you the way I understood love. With fear. With pride. With walls." "And now?" she asked, her voice not challenging, just curious. "Now I love you without expectation," he said. "Without asking for anything in return. Loving you is the easiest thing I do. But I will not ask you to forgive me before you're ready. I will not rush you." The breeze moved through the grass. The boys shouted triumphantly at a particularly large splash. The world felt open. Sophia let the quiet linger a moment. Then she reached for his hand, not hesitantly this time. Not cautiously. She took it fully, fingers intertwining with his. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, and the truth of it was something that resonated deep between them. "And I'm not afraid of loving you again. I'm only afraid of losing what we've built." His fingers tightened around hers, steady, grounding. "We don't go backward," he said softly. "We build forward." They sat together like that for a long time while the boys played, hand in hand, not as two people trying to reclaim a past, but as two people choosing a future. A slow one. A gentle one. A real one. When they packed up to leave, Leo ran to them first. "Daddy, look! I found a heart-shaped rock." Andrew knelt, taking the small stone with a smile that softened every sharp line of his face. "That's special," he said. "Let's keep it." Sophia watched them, her heart full and grounded and steady. Family had returned, not by force, not by forgiveness alone, but by growth, patience, and the willingness to choose each other again, day after day. And this time, no one walked away.